The smell of antiseptic still clung to my skin, a reminder of the sterile, lifeless room I'd been trapped in for weeks. At 82, I thought I had seen it all. But nothing could have prepared me for the phone call that came while I lay in that hospital bed. My name is Margaret Benson. I'm a mother of 3, grandmother to 5, and a woman who has lived through her share of heartaches. I've watched my children grow up, marry, and build lives of their own. They were my pride and joy, my legacy. Or at least I thought they were. But that morning, as I lay there with tubes running through my veins, the notary's voice on the phone shattered what was left of my peace. "Ms. Benson, I'm afraid there's been a mistake. Your children, your son and daughter, have already sold everything. The TV, the beach house, your jewelry. Everything." Could hardly breathe. I tried to sit up, my old bones creaking, but the pain kept me down. The thought of them, my own flesh and blood, selling my belongings like I was nothing more than an old woman whose time had come, it left me sick to my stomach. "They did what?" I gasped, clutching the phone tighter, as if my grip could somehow reverse their actions. I could hear the notary's hesitation. "I'm so sorry, Ms. Benson. But they've already moved forward. I was just calling to let you know the paperwork has been signed." As I hung up the phone, the weight of the situation crashed over me. It wasn't just my things they had taken, it was my dignity, my trust. I had worked hard for every single item in that house. The beach house was where I spent my summers with my late husband, the one place I thought would always be mine. But now everything was gone. And no one had bothered to tell me. Not a word. Not even a phone call from the people I'd spent my life raising. I felt my chest tighten, tears welling in my eyes. I was hurt, yes. But more than that, I was furious. How could they do this to me? I closed my eyes and sank into the bed, trying to block out the tears, the anger, and the betrayal. It wasn't just the things they'd sold. It was the principle, the disrespect. And I wasn't going to let this go. Not this time. I knew what I had to do. I had spent my life as a patient woman, as a mother who always put everyone's needs ahead of my own. But now things were different. Now it was time to fight. But little did I know, this was only the beginning of a much bigger game. A game that would involve secrets I never thought I'd uncover. And a twist that would leave my children in shock, begging for forgiveness. I always thought family was supposed to be a safe place. A home where love and trust could grow, where the roots of our history were deeply embedded. But that was before I learned the ugly truth about my own children. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when I had hope. My late husband, Henry, and I worked hard to build a life for ourselves and our family. The beach house, the little farm, the modest but loving home. Everything we had, we earned together. And then, when the time came, we gave it all to our children. We poured our hearts into raising them right, teaching them the values that had kept us grounded all these years. Respect, love, hard work, and loyalty. But something changed after Henry passed. It was slow at first. Subtle cracks in the foundation I hadn't noticed. The phone calls grew shorter, the visits less frequent. They all started to live their lives in their own way, as if I was no longer a part of the picture. It wasn't just the absence that hurt, it was the indifference. I would invite them over, make their favorite meals, and wait patiently by the door, hoping to hear the sound of their voices. But they never came, not unless they needed something. And I was always there, always ready to give. I remember the day my daughter, Rachel, came over to visit. It was a sunny afternoon, and I was sitting on the porch, my knitting needles in hand, when she arrived, looking tired and worn. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, sitting down next to me. I looked at her, trying to read her face. Something was off. I had always prided myself on being able to see through her facade. She had inherited my stubborn streak. But that day she looked different. Tired, angry even. "What's wrong, Rachel?" I asked, my heart sinking in my chest. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. "We're having financial problems, Mom. And the house, the beach house, it's just too much. We need to sell it. It's not practical anymore." My blood ran cold. That beach house, the one Henry and I had spent so many summers in, was now being treated like a burden. I couldn't believe my ears. Sell it. I repeated, the words tasting foreign in my mouth. Rachel, that place means something to us. It's where your father and I built our dreams, where we spent the last happy years of his life. It's not just a house. It's a part of who we are. She looked away, her eyes clouded with frustration. I know, Mom, but it's too much. You don't need it anymore. And you're not getting any younger. Maybe it's time to let go. Let go. Those words felt like a knife to my heart. Was that what I had become? Something to be discarded when it was no longer convenient. But I didn't argue. Not that day. I stayed silent, watching her leave with a coldness in her step that I couldn't understand. She hadn't asked for my opinion. She hadn't even considered my feelings. It was as if the woman I had raised was gone, replaced by someone who only saw me as a source of money, a tool to use until I was no longer useful. But I didn't say anything then. I thought I'd have time to talk things through. Time to make her see reason. Time to remind her of what that house represented. I was wrong. 2 months later, when I found myself in the hospital, I couldn't have imagined how fast everything would unravel. That morning, I had been woken up by the sharp sting of the nurse's needle. Just a routine checkup, Mrs. Benson, she had said, but I could feel something was wrong. I had been feeling weak for days, but I never imagined it would lead to this. I hadn't realized the severity of my condition. And yet, that was when they took everything. Rachel and my son, Evan, had made the decision together, without me. They sold the beach house. They sold the TV. They sold everything. Like I was a stranger who had no say in the life I had built. And then came the notary's call. The final betrayal. I couldn't believe they'd done it. I thought I was prepared for anything. But when the reality hit, I felt like I was suffocating. But there was something more. Something I hadn't told you. Something I would learn soon after the notary's call. Something that would change everything. I had been blindsided by my own flesh and blood, but they had no idea what I had been keeping from them. There was something I had been hiding, something that would turn the tables completely. It's funny, you know. You spend a lifetime thinking you know people, your family, your friends, even your neighbors. You believe you understand them because you've shared your life with them. But in the end, you realize there are pieces of yourself you've kept hidden. Not because you meant to, but because you had to. After the notary's call, everything around me felt unreal. Like I was floating above my own life, watching it unfold from a distance. I could barely focus on the shock of my children's betrayal because my mind was racing with something else, something I hadn't thought about in years. But before I tell you what that is, let me take you back to the beginning. I was only 22 when I met Henry. He was charming, kind, and ambitious, everything I thought I needed. He was older than me, settled, and had his own business. He treated me like I was the only woman in the world, and for a long time I believed him. We married young, had 3 children in quick succession. A beautiful home in the suburbs, then the beach house. It was all we ever wanted. And it was all we worked for, together. Henry worked long hours and I stayed home, raising our children, managing the house, taking care of the small farm we had. But while we built our lives, I kept something from him. A secret that, if I'm being honest, I wish I could have shared with him. But there was never the right time. My husband had always been a man of principle, strong, steady, and just. But there was one thing he didn't know. The beach house wasn't just ours. It never had been. It belonged to someone else. It wasn't just property, it was a deal. A dangerous deal I made when I was younger, before I ever met Henry. Before I became the woman everyone depended on. It was my mistake, my mess, and for years I kept it hidden, even from him. The beach house had been handed down to me from a man I had once been involved with, long before I met Henry. His name was Frank. He was a millionaire, a man who saw my potential and took advantage of it. He promised me the beach house in exchange for my silence. He knew my family was struggling at the time, and he knew exactly how to manipulate me. But when I married Henry, I thought it was over. I thought I had left Frank behind, just like I had left that life behind. But the beach house, it was my burden to bear. Frank had always told me that if I ever needed anything, the house would be there. But it wasn't just about the house. It was about the secret, about the promise I made to him. It wasn't until after Henry's death that I truly understood the weight of it all. I thought I could go on, that I could live a quiet life, but I couldn't. The guilt ate at me, but I never told anyone. Not Henry, not Rachel, not even Evan. It was mine to carry. And now, as I lay in that hospital bed, hearing about the beach house being sold, everything came crashing back. My children had no idea that house wasn't even fully mine to begin with. They thought they could just sell it, no questions asked. But they didn't know the deal I had made all those years ago. And when the notary called to inform me of what they had done, it hit me. They were about to lose more than just property. They were about to lose everything. I wasn't going to let them destroy what little was left of my legacy. Not when I had kept that secret for so long. It took days before I could gather the strength to confront them. I wasn't sure what I would say or how I would say it, but one thing was certain. I couldn't keep hiding anymore. It wasn't just the beach house or the money. It was the truth. And the truth, I realized, was worth more than anything they had taken from me. When I finally called Rachel, I was shaking. My voice trembled when I spoke, but I didn't care anymore. She needed to know. "Rachel," I said, her name feeling foreign on my lips. "There's something I've never told you. Something I should have told you years ago. The beach house, it's not just ours. It was part of a deal I made before I met your father. A deal I've kept hidden for over 50 years. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, followed by a nervous laugh. "Mom, what are you talking about? You've had the house for as long as I can remember. It's always been part of our family." I wasn't surprised by her response. She didn't know the truth. None of them did. "Rachel, I didn't want to burden you with it. But the house wasn't fully mine to sell. And neither is the money from it. There's someone else who has a claim to it." Her voice faltered, a mix of disbelief and confusion. "What are you saying, Mom?" "I'm saying that Frank. He owns part of the beach house, and if I don't follow through on my end of the deal, there will be consequences. Serious ones." There was a long silence, and I could almost hear the wheels turning in her mind. Rachel wasn't stupid, but this was something she had never expected. She didn't know the cost of betraying me. "Mom, we didn't know. We thought it was just you and Dad's. But you're saying we can't just sell it." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "No, Rachel. And you'll find out soon enough why." Rachel didn't respond right away. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could hear the faint rustling of papers, her breathing shaky. I knew she was processing everything I had just said. She wasn't the only one who had been blindsided. I was too. I thought telling her the truth would bring clarity, maybe even a sense of relief. But instead it just made everything more complicated. In the days that followed, I could feel the distance growing between us, both emotionally and physically. My calls went unanswered, my texts left unread. It was as if the truth had opened a door to a place I had no business entering. It wasn't just Rachel. Evan, my only son, had also started avoiding me. I had hoped he would take my side, that he would understand why I'd kept the secret for so long. But when I finally reached him, the conversation was nothing like I had imagined. "Mom, you're telling me that this whole time, we've been living in a house that doesn't fully belong to us? That we've been lying about it all these years?" Evan's voice was tight, controlled, and I could hear the anger simmering beneath it. "I didn't lie, Evan," I said quietly. "I just didn't tell you everything. I didn't want you to carry the burden. I thought if I kept it to myself, it would protect all of us." There was a long pause before Evan spoke again. His words came out in short, clipped sentences, almost as if he were trying to hold himself back from saying something he'd regret. "You should have told us, Mom. You shouldn't have kept this from us. We could have worked through it together. I didn't want to involve you in my mess. I thought I could handle it," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. The phone went silent once again, and for a moment I thought he had hung up. But then his voice broke through, rough and raw. You kept it from us because you didn't trust us, didn't you? I wanted to deny it, to tell him that it wasn't true. But deep down I knew it was. I hadn't trusted them, not enough to share the burden. Not enough to let them in on the secret that had haunted me for decades. And now I was paying the price for that choice. I didn't know how to tell you, I murmured. But it's done now. And I need you to understand. I never meant for any of this to happen. You're my children. I wanted to protect you. But there was no more comfort in his voice. Only coldness. I don't know if I can forgive you for this, Mom. You've put us in a terrible position. And now it's too late. The line went dead, and I sat there in the silence, the weight of his words sinking into my bones. I had hoped for a chance to explain, to make it right. But I had underestimated how much damage one secret could do. The next few days were a blur of emotions. I watched my children slowly drift away, pulling themselves further from me with each passing day. I was no longer the mother they once knew. To them I had become a stranger. A woman who had lied, who had kept them in the dark about something that had now come to light. And they didn't know how to handle it. But the hardest part came when the lawyer's letter arrived. The one I had feared for years. It was from Frank's estate. You will need to resolve this matter as soon as possible, Ms. Benson. The letter read. Your claim on the property will be contested if not addressed immediately. Frank made it clear in his will that the beach house was never fully yours, and that a certain portion is to be returned to his estate upon your death. However, you may have an opportunity to resolve the matter through a buyout. The words jumped off the page and hit me like a slap. Frank had made sure of everything, hadn't he? All these years I had thought I had time. Time to deal with it. Time to live out my last years without worrying about the mess I had created. But Frank's will had been crystal clear. And now I had to face the consequences of my choices. I didn't know what to do next. My children were still reeling from the truth. And now this. How could I fix this mess? How could I salvage anything from the ruins of my life? But as I sat there staring at the letter, something inside me clicked. I wasn't going to let Frank win. I wasn't going to let my children suffer for the mistakes I had made. And so I made a decision. A decision that would change everything. I would fight for the beach house. Not for the money, not for the property, but for the legacy of the family Henry and I had built. I wasn't going to let it slip away. Not without a fight. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed to gain back my children's trust. I needed them to stand by me, to help me fix the damage we had all created. But first I needed to show them that I was still their mother, the woman they could rely on. I was done hiding. It was time to take control. The weight of the letter still hung heavy in the air, like a storm cloud refusing to break. I had made the decision to fight, to reclaim what was mine, not just for the beach house but for the principles that had guided me through my life. I had kept so much from my children, and now I was going to make sure they understood why. But I couldn't fight this battle alone. I needed them by my side, and I would do whatever it took to prove to them that I was still their mother. The woman who had raised them, who loved them, who made sacrifices they'd never truly understood. The hardest part, however, was how to begin. How could I reach them after everything that had happened? How could I bridge the chasm that had formed between us? I decided to start with Rachel. She was the one I needed to make amends with first. After all, she was the one who had always been closest to me, the one who had looked up to me when she was younger. I hoped that if I could make things right with her, the others would follow. I called her one more time, my hands shaking as I dialed her number. The call went to voicemail. Rachel, please just hear me out. I know you're angry, but I need you to understand why I did what I did. I wasn't trying to hide anything from you. I thought I was protecting you. But now I see that I made a mistake. Please, I'm begging you. Let's talk. Let's fix this together. I need you. I didn't expect a call back right away. I knew it was going to take time. But I had to make the first move. I had to show her that I wasn't the woman who had abandoned them, not the woman they thought I was. The days that followed were full of uncertainty. I focused on getting stronger physically and emotionally. I began to walk around the hospital grounds, feeling the fresh air on my skin, the sun on my face. It felt good to be alive, to have a purpose again. But the ache in my heart for my children, the hollow space where their love used to be, never quite went away. Then, just as I was about to give up hope, Rachel called. Her voice was tentative, hesitant, but there was a softness to it I hadn't heard in days. "Mom, I got your message," she said, her voice cracking slightly. I've been thinking about everything. And I'm sorry. I've been angry, but I understand now. I never knew you were carrying so much on your own. I felt a flood of relief rush over me. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, was speaking to me again. She was hearing me. Finally. "I never meant to hurt you, Rachel. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I see now that I failed you. I didn't trust you enough to share the truth. I should have known better." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment I thought she might hang up. But then she spoke again, this time with a firmer resolve. "I'm not saying it's okay, Mom, but I'm willing to try. I want to understand. I want to help you fight this. We'll fix this together." Tears welled in my eyes. For the first time in days, I felt like the weight had been lifted. Rachel had forgiven me. Not completely, but enough to start rebuilding what had been broken. And that was all I needed. Little hope. The next day, I asked Rachel to meet me at the beach house. We both knew it wasn't just a house anymore. It was a symbol of everything we had lost, and everything I was willing to fight for. When she arrived, her face was still lined with the stress of the past few days. But there was something different about her now, a glimmer of hope in her eyes, a willingness to move forward. I could see that she was ready to fight too. "I know this isn't easy for you," I said softly, standing next to her as we looked out at the beach. "But this place, it's not just about property. It's about what it represents. It's about us." Rachel nodded, her gaze fixed on the waves crashing against the shore. "I get it now. I was angry because I thought you had kept everything from us. But I understand why you did it. You were protecting us. You thought it was the right thing. I didn't protect you, Rachel. I isolated you. I made you think you were the one who had to take care of everything. I should have trusted you from the beginning. I should have told you the truth." We stood there in silence for a while, the sounds of the ocean filling the quiet. It wasn't the closure I had hoped for, but it was a start. And for me it was enough. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. With Rachel by my side, we began to gather the documents, the proof, everything that would help us fight Frank's estate. It wasn't going to be easy, but I wasn't about to back down. I had spent my life building something meaningful, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. But there was still one more hurdle to overcome. Evan. After our last conversation, I wasn't sure if he would ever speak to me again. But I knew I couldn't move forward without him. If I wanted to bring this family back together, I needed to find a way to reach him. And so I made the decision. I would fight for the beach house, not just for me but for them, my children. For the legacy we had all built together. The first few days after Rachel's return felt like a fragile peace had settled in. We had started working together, sorting through the mess my children and I had created. The legal paperwork, the statements, the phone calls, all the endless tasks to fight for what was ours. But there was still something gnawing at me, a void I couldn't ignore. Evan. Despite Rachel's willingness to move forward, Evan was still a ghost. I hadn't heard from him since our last conversation. I couldn't reach him through calls or messages. It was like he had disappeared into thin air. The weight of that silence hung over me, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle hadn't even begun. I needed him on my side, not as a passive bystander but as someone who cared enough to join the fight. So I did something I never thought I would. I called him again. "Evan, it's me," I said, the shakiness in my voice surprising even myself. "I know you're angry. I know you don't trust me right now, but we need to talk. You're my son and I need you. I'm not just fighting for the beach house. I'm fighting for us, for our family." There was a long silence on the other end, so long that I began to wonder if he had hung up. But then his voice broke through, colder than I had ever heard it before. I don't know what you want from me, Mom. What do you want me to say? You lied to me. You lied to all of us. I flinched, his words like knives. But I couldn't back down. Not now. I know I did, Evan. And I'm sorry. I can't undo the past, but I can try to fix it. This isn't just about money or property. It's about everything we've lost because of this secret. It's about me being a mother to you again. Don't you want that? Don't you want to fight for what we have left? Another long pause. This time I could hear his breath, shaky but slow. Then finally he spoke. I'm not sure what to believe anymore, Mom. I don't know if I can just forgive you and pretend this didn't happen. I'm not asking you to forgive me right now, Evan. I'm asking you to help me fix it. We've lost enough. But we can still win. We can still get our family back. There was another silence, and just when I thought he would hang up, he said something that shook me to my core. I'll come by tomorrow. But I'm not promising anything. That was all I needed. He was coming back. He was going to help me fight. We would fight this together as a family. And for the first time since everything had started to unravel, I allowed myself to believe we had a chance. The next day, Evan showed up. He walked through the front door, looking like the son I remembered, the one who had once been my little boy, full of life and laughter. Now, though, there was something hardened about him, something that had changed forever. I'm here, Mom, he said, his voice firm. But I still don't know if I can trust you. I don't expect you to trust me right now, I replied, taking a seat at the kitchen table. But I need you to understand why this is so important. I've spent my entire life building something for this family. And I won't let it all fall apart because of my mistakes. Rachel was sitting beside me, her eyes flickering between the two of us. She had made her decision, and now it was time for Evan to make his. You don't know everything, she said softly, breaking the silence that had settled between us. You don't know what we've been through. What Mom's been through. Evan turned to face her, his eyes hard. What do you mean, Rachel? What are you talking about? Rachel swallowed, then took a deep breath. There's more to this than just the beach house, Evan. There's a reason Mom kept this secret. A reason she never told us. I watched as Evan's expression shifted from anger to confusion, his brows furrowing. What are you saying? I glanced over at Rachel, who nodded, signaling me to tell him. It was time for the truth to come out, everything. Before Henry, I began, my voice trembling. There was Frank. He was the one who gave me the beach house. And it wasn't a gift, Evan. It was a deal. A deal I made when I was young, when I thought I had no other choice. Frank was a dangerous man, and I thought I could get away from him. But I couldn't. Not until after Henry died. He's the reason I've been hiding all these years. He's the reason the beach house is tied up in so many secrets. Evan stood up, pacing back and forth. What are you telling me, Mom? That this whole time the house we've lived in, it wasn't even fully ours. Not entirely, I said quietly, feeling the weight of my confession. But I thought I could protect you. I thought I could keep it all hidden. I didn't want you to carry the burden I've been carrying. Rachel looked at Evan, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't understand, Evan. This house, this legacy, it's been tainted by so much. But it's also been a part of our family. Mom kept it from us, but we can make it right. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something in Evan's eyes, a mix of disbelief and a small spark of understanding. He turned back to me, his voice softer now. You kept this from us because you were trying to protect us. Get that now. But what are we going to do about it? I looked at both of them, my children. They were still my family despite everything. And together we could fight for what was ours. We're going to fight for the house, Evan. And we're going to fight for the truth. Together. As we began to prepare for the legal battle ahead, I knew this was only the beginning. But for the first time I felt like we were on the same team. It wasn't about the beach house anymore. It was about our family's future. It was about redemption. The days blurred together as the legal battle began. With Rachel and Evan now on my side, I thought we stood a fighting chance. But there was something I wasn't prepared for, the depths to which Frank's estate would go to take everything from me. We had hired a lawyer, a man named Thomas Cartwright, who seemed competent enough. But I could see the doubt in his eyes as he reviewed the legal papers. The clauses in Frank's will were designed to entangle us in a web of legal jargon, binding us to a deal none of us had ever truly understood. "This is going to be a challenge," Thomas said, looking up from the stack of papers. Frank was very thorough, and he made sure this beach house wasn't just property. It was a pawn in a much larger game. Whoever inherits it after your passing will have to jump through hoops. I felt my heart sink. I had known Frank was manipulative, but I hadn't realized just how much control he had over my life, how much he had intertwined our fates. Every time I thought we had a handle on the situation, a new piece of the puzzle emerged, more complicated than the last. "Are there any loopholes?" Rachel asked, her voice sharp with determination. "We've got to find a way out of this." Thomas didn't answer immediately. He was too busy flipping through the pages, absorbing the weight of the documents. Finally he sighed, as though he had been holding his breath the entire time. "There might be one. But it's going to take time and resources we don't have." Frank was a lawyer, and he left behind some tricky clauses that even I'm not sure we can overcome. I could feel the tension building between us. Rachel's face darkened, her impatience rising. But it was Evan's quiet voice that broke the silence. "What if we go directly to Frank's heirs? Couldn't we negotiate with them? It might be the only way out." Thomas leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "That's possible, but we have no idea where they are, or if they're even alive. Frank wasn't a family man. He made a point of severing ties with everyone, even before his death." I felt the weight of his words sink in. The road ahead was getting darker, and the more I learned about Frank's twisted dealings, the more I realized just how much power he still held over us, even from beyond the grave. But then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I received a letter from Frank's estate. The notary's office had been busy. They had found a new clause in the will, one I had never seen before. And it changed everything. "Ms. Benson," the letter read, "we regret to inform you that upon further review, we have found an additional stipulation in Mr. Franklin Garvey's will. It appears that if you fail to pay the buyout fee within the next 30 days, you forfeit all rights to the property, including the beach house and any assets tied to it. This clause supersedes all prior agreements." I sat in stunned silence. The terms had changed again. This time there was no room for negotiation. The buyout fee was a staggering amount, one I couldn't even begin to imagine how to come up with in such a short time. "I'm not giving up," I whispered, staring at the letter. "I refuse to let him win." Rachel placed her hand on my shoulder, squeezing it gently. "We're not giving up either, Mom. We're in this together." We spent the next few days working tirelessly, sifting through old papers, calling in favors, and trying to track down anyone who might have information about Frank's mysterious heirs. We learned that Frank had been more than just a businessman. He had been a shadowy figure, deeply involved in shady dealings with people who had no interest in family or loyalty. The deeper we dug, the more we uncovered. Frank had ties to people who were still in power, people whose names had never appeared in any of our family's history. He had hidden assets, off-the-books transactions, and a network of connections that could make the mafia look like child's play. It was becoming clear that we weren't just fighting for a beach house. We were fighting for control over our own lives. But the real shock came when I discovered something in Frank's personal ledger. Among the long lists of transactions there was a name, my name. And it wasn't just any name. It was a name I hadn't heard in over 30 years. "Margaret," the ledger read, "is the only person who holds the final key. If she wants to claim her inheritance, she must come forward. Only then will the true legacy be revealed." I froze, unable to process what I was reading. My inheritance. What did this mean? What had Frank left behind? Suddenly, everything I thought I knew about the beach house, the will, and Frank's intentions seemed like a distraction. There was something much bigger at play. Something I wasn't prepared for. "What is this?" Rachel asked, peering over my shoulder at the ledger. What is Frank talking about? I shook my head, my mind racing. I don't know, but I think we've been looking at this all wrong. This isn't just about money or property. It's about something else. Something Frank kept hidden all these years. The pieces were finally starting to fit together, but just as quickly as the puzzle came into focus, the door to our future slammed shut. The next day, Thomas called me with more bad news. Margaret, you need to come down to the courthouse immediately. There's been a filing. It's not good. I didn't need to ask what it was. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. Frank's estate was making its move. And this time it wasn't just the beach house at stake. The courthouse was packed when I arrived. My heart was racing as I walked through the heavy wooden doors, my mind a whirl of thoughts. I had no idea what Thomas meant by the filing, but the pit in my stomach told me it wasn't good. There was a sense of urgency in his voice that made it clear this wasn't just another procedural step in the legal battle. It was the final blow. I spotted Thomas immediately, standing near the front with a somber look on his face. He nodded as I approached, and I could see the weight of the situation in his eyes. Margaret, I wish I had better news, but I need to explain what's going on. What's happened? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked around, then leaned in closer. The court has just filed a motion to claim the beach house and all related assets. Frank's estate has petitioned for the full dissolution of the property, and they've added something we weren't prepared for. They've found a clause in the will that ties everything back to Frank's original plans. The house, the property, and everything it holds, it's not just about money. It's about the legacy he left behind. I felt my blood run cold. I'd known Frank had power, but this was something I hadn't anticipated. What do you mean, Thomas? What legacy? Thomas sighed, his gaze faltering. The court filings are calling it a true heir clause. It's based on blood, Margaret. Frank's true heir, whoever he deems worthy, will inherit everything. The house, the land, the assets. And Frank has named you, Margaret. Not just as the owner, but as the true heir. I blinked in disbelief. Me. But Frank. Frank kept this from everyone, including his own family. There was one clause in his will that ties everything back to you. And according to the court documents, if you don't step forward and claim your inheritance, it all goes to the estate. You've been holding the key to this all along. The weight of his words hit me like a ton of bricks. All this time, I thought I was fighting for a beach house, for some final shred of dignity. But this was something much bigger. Frank had left me a legacy, something more valuable than I could have ever imagined. And now I had to decide if I was willing to claim it, knowing what it would cost. I looked back at Rachel and Evan, who were standing in the back, looking confused and worried. It hit me then. This wasn't just about the past. It was about the future. My children needed to understand what was at stake, what we were really fighting for. I had to explain it to them, to make them see what Frank had left us. But how could I? How could I ask them to support me in something so complicated, so filled with secrets? As the courtroom buzzed with chatter, I felt a sense of finality in the air. There was no turning back now. I had to make a choice. The next few days passed in a blur of meetings, legal jargon, and mounting tension. Frank's estate was moving fast, filing motions left and right. But there was one thing they didn't count on: my determination. I gathered Rachel and Evan at the house that evening. They had questions, and they deserved answers. I could see it in their eyes. This was no longer just about a beach house or an inheritance. It was about family, about trust, about whether I could guide them through this, or whether it would tear us apart forever. "Mom, we don't understand," Evan said, his voice trembling. "What exactly is going on? Why is this so important now? And why didn't you tell us all this before?" I sighed, feeling the weight of the truth pressing against my chest. "I didn't know how, Evan. Frank's will wasn't just a regular will. It was a blueprint for his twisted control. He left me the beach house, but there was something more. Something I couldn't have told you at the time. He made me the true heir. not just to the property but to everything he built, everything he controlled. But here's the catch. I can't claim it without a cost. I need to decide if I'm willing to do what's necessary to take it. Rachel's eyes widened. What do you mean, a cost? I took a deep breath. Frank's legacy is tied to power, Rachel. The kind of power that changes people. He didn't leave me the beach house as a gift. He left it as a chain. To claim it, I have to take on everything he built. His secrets, his dark alliances, his legacy of manipulation. And once I claim it, it's mine. But that means I'll be responsible for everything. Evan leaned forward, his voice shaking. And what happens if you don't take it? What happens to us? If I don't take it, everything goes to the estate. The house, the money, the land, everything. And we lose it all. But if I take it, I'm bound to it forever. There's no turning back. And I need you to understand, this isn't just about money. It's about me stepping up. I've spent my life protecting you, but now I need you to trust me. This is our fight, not just mine. Rachel and Evan exchanged looks, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and understanding. So what are you going to do? Rachel asked softly. I looked at them both, the weight of the decision settling heavily in my chest. I'm going to fight for it. For all of us. We deserve this. And I'm not going to let Frank's ghost control us any longer. The decision had been made, but as I looked at my children, I knew this was just the beginning. Frank's legacy wasn't just something we could ignore. It was something that had already shaped our lives in ways we couldn't even imagine. And now it was time for us to take control of it. But the cost of that decision was still unknown. There were forces at play, people I hadn't even begun to comprehend. And as we prepared for the final battle, I couldn't shake the feeling that the true test was yet to come. The silence that followed the judge's ruling felt like an eternity. The weight of the decision was heavy, not just in the courtroom but in my heart. 4 years I had fought against Frank's shadow, but it was clear now that there were still layers to this fight I hadn't yet uncovered. The inheritance, the property, the will. None of it was as straightforward as I had believed. As the gavel came down, I felt the finality of it. The beach house, the land, and everything tied to it were mine, legally but not without consequence. The true heir clause had put a target on my back, and Frank's estate wasn't just going to roll over. The estate's lawyers, though caught off guard by the ruling, didn't let their shock show. They had planned for this moment, and they quickly began outlining the next steps. They'd already started gathering the necessary papers, pushing me further into the world Frank had left behind. We'll handle the transfer of assets in the next few weeks, one of the attorneys said with an air of inevitability. But, Ms. Benson, as we discussed, there are additional matters that require your attention. Frank's legacy is tied to much more than just this property. I stood motionless, my mind racing. What do you mean, more than just property? The lawyer glanced at the others in the room before speaking, his tone a little softer. Frank left behind more than just financial assets. There are responsibilities that you'll need to assume. People, decisions, connections. It's not just about owning the property, Ms. Benson. It's about stepping into the world Frank built. A chill ran down my spine. I had prepared for legal challenges, for the tension of fighting for something that had been taken from me. But I wasn't prepared for this. Frank's legacy wasn't just tied to a house. It was a network of power, influence, and people who would expect something in return for the fortune they'd had a hand in shaping. I don't want anything to do with Frank's dealings, I said, my voice steely despite the dread clawing at my insides. I don't care about his network, his legacy, or any of his deals. I just want my family to have peace. The lawyer didn't flinch. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. Frank didn't leave behind just a beach house. He left behind a web of obligations. You'll need to meet with some of the people involved before we proceed. In the following weeks, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of phone calls, meetings, and documents I barely understood. The estate's lawyers weren't just handling the transfer of the property. They were pulling me deeper into a world I had no interest in being a part of. People from Frank's past, people I never wanted to meet, began calling. A woman named Margaret Clark, an old business partner of Frank's, insisted we meet. When I agreed to meet her in person, she arrived at my doorstep with an air of authority, wearing a sharp suit and a determined look. "Ms. Benson," she said, her voice low but forceful, "I understand you've inherited the house. But that's just the beginning. Frank made sure his interests were protected, and now you're the one who has to keep those interests alive." I felt a knot tighten in my chest as I looked at her. "I'm not interested in any of that. I never asked for Frank's legacy. All I want is to move on with my life." Her eyes narrowed. "You don't have a choice, Ms. Benson. Frank's business didn't stop with him. You're tied to it now, whether you like it or not." The words hung in the air. It wasn't just about owning property. It was about taking on the life Frank had built. A life filled with people, decisions, and responsibilities that I wasn't prepared for. I didn't know who to trust anymore. Frank's world had been built on lies, manipulation, and power, and now I was expected to walk into that world as though I could carry on his legacy. The more I learned, the more I realized just how deep Frank's influence had been. He had built an empire, and I had inherited the right to either continue it or tear it down. I wasn't sure I could do either. Part of me wanted to walk away, to leave everything behind and start over completely. But the other part of me, the part that had fought so hard for this, knew I couldn't let Frank's legacy control me. Not anymore. I sat in my office late one night, staring at the papers scattered in front of me. The estate was worth more than I had ever imagined. But with that wealth came power. Power I wasn't sure I was ready for. There was talk of consolidating businesses, of meeting with important figures who had once been loyal to Frank. Felt like a trap. A golden cage that had been waiting for me all along. And then came the call that changed everything. "Ms. Benson." The voice on the other end was familiar but not welcome. It was Thomas, the estate's lawyer. "I need you to prepare yourself. The other heirs are requesting a meeting. You'll need to decide if you want to join them or if you plan to walk away from it all." "Other heirs?" I repeated, confused. "Yes," Thomas replied. "There's a possibility you're not the only one who inherited Frank's assets. There are others who claim a share. And they'll be expecting you at the meeting." I felt my heart drop. This wasn't over. There was more to Frank's legacy than I had ever known. And now I had to face the full force of it. The meeting was set for the following week. I knew it was time to make a choice, to finally decide what kind of person I was going to be in the face of all this power. Would I let it consume me? Or would I take control and rewrite Frank's legacy to fit my own vision of what was right? As I prepared for the meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change again. The past was never truly gone. It was always lurking, waiting for the moment to strike. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Whatever happened, I was ready. I could feel the weight of the moment as I entered the conference room, the tension thick in the air. I had no idea what to expect from the other heirs, but I was certain of one thing. I wasn't about to let anyone push me around. This was my inheritance now. Frank might have set the rules, but I was going to rewrite them. The room was imposing. Large windows framed the skyline, but they couldn't distract from the presence of the people sitting around the table. There were 5 of them. 2 men and 3 women, all dressed in sharp business suits, their eyes scanning me as I walked in. Each one exuded an air of confidence, but there was something else, something beneath the surface. Greed, ambition, and I was willing to bet, a thirst for power. I took my seat at the head of the table, my back straight, my hands folded in front of me. I wasn't just there for a meeting. I was there to stake my claim. "Ms. Benson," one of the men spoke, his voice low but confident. "It's good to finally meet you. We've been waiting for this moment." "I'm sure you have," I replied evenly, looking around the table. "But I'm not here to hand over anything. I'm here to discuss what's next." The man, tall and broad-shouldered, gave a slight smile. "Of course. We all know why we're here. Frank's estate was never just about property, it was about power. And now that you've inherited, We need to discuss how things will proceed. I felt my stomach tighten. I had known this was coming. Frank's empire was built on influence, and that influence didn't disappear overnight. But I had to make one thing clear. I wasn't afraid of them. Frank built his empire on manipulation, lies, and secrets. I'm not interested in continuing any of that. What I'm interested in is creating something different. Something better. There was a brief silence, and then a woman with short platinum blonde hair spoke up. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. And what exactly do you think you can do with it? Frank left this to you for a reason. You don't just walk away from this kind of power. You embrace it or you lose it. I'm not losing anything, I said, my voice steady. I'm taking control. And I'm not going to let any of you dictate how I run things. The blonde woman smiled slightly, as if amused. You don't understand, do you? Frank didn't just leave you property. He left you everything. His businesses, his connections, his alliances. People are waiting for you to step up to show you can handle it. And we're here to make sure you do. My mind raced. Frank had been a master manipulator, but I wasn't going to let anyone else take his place. Not now. Not ever. I'm not interested in carrying out Frank's legacy, I said firmly. I want to create something that's mine. Something that's built on trust, not manipulation. The tension in the room thickened, and I could see the subtle exchange of glances between the heirs. They weren't pleased with my response. But that didn't matter. They had no idea what they were up against. Frank's empire wasn't going to control me. It wasn't going to control any of us. The tall man leaned forward slightly. What exactly are you proposing, Ms. Benson? I met his gaze, unwavering. I'm proposing that we divide Frank's empire. Let each of you take what you want, what you've been waiting for, but I won't be involved in any of the shady dealings he left behind. I'm not your pawn, and I'm not interested in continuing the game. If you want to fight for control, then you can have it. But I won't be a part of it. Another woman, younger and with dark curly hair, spoke up this time. You think you can just walk away from everything Frank built? He didn't leave you a choice, Margaret. You're tied to this, whether you like it or not. I didn't back down. Then I'll untie myself. There was a moment of silence, and I could feel the anger building in the room. But I didn't flinch. I had already made my decision, and nothing they said would change that. We'll see, the blonde woman said, her voice dripping with disdain. You might think you're in control now, but you're just starting. If you think you can take Frank's legacy and turn it into something different, you're gonna have to fight for it. And we're not just going to let you walk away. I'm not asking for permission, I replied coolly. I'm taking what's mine. You'll see. The meeting ended on a tense note, with the heirs retreating into their separate corners. The power dynamics had shifted, but the fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Frank's empire was no longer his. It was mine. But it wasn't just about claiming the property or the businesses. It was about reclaiming my life, my family's future, and building something new. The days following the meeting were a whirlwind of phone calls, legal documents, and power struggles. The heirs were trying to get me to back down, but I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't just protecting my family. I was fighting for what was right. I was going to rebuild from the ground up, and this time it was going to be on my terms. Rachel and Evan were by my side every step of the way. They knew what I was up against, but they also knew that we had the strength to do this together. This wasn't just about money or power. It was about legacy. It was about making sure Frank's twisted version of the world didn't define us. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. I was ready to fight for it. For my family, for my children, for myself. We were going to create a legacy of our own. The weeks following the tense meeting with Frank's other heirs were filled with chaos. The world I had inherited wasn't just an empire of wealth. It was a tangled web of power, manipulation, and secrets, none of which I was prepared for. But now I had no choice. I was in too deep. I spent the days meeting with Frank's former associates, business partners, investors, and even a few of his old enemies. Everyone had an agenda, everyone wanted something. And though I had made it clear that I was taking control of the estate, it didn't seem to matter. I wasn't just fighting against Frank's heirs. I was fighting against a system that had been in place for years. One evening, as I sat in my office, going through yet another stack of legal documents, the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Ms. Benson. The voice on the other end was low and measured. This is Charles Davenport. I represent some of Mr. Garvey's more influential friends. We need to talk. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of the call pressing on me. Influential friends. I repeated. What exactly does that mean? Let's just say that Frank's legacy didn't end with the beach house. There are matters you need to understand, Ms. Benson, if you intend to truly claim what you've inherited. My heart raced. I'm listening. There are deals that go beyond what you see. Beyond the property, the businesses. Frank had connections. He wasn't just a businessman. He was involved in everything from local politics to international trade. And now, you're expected to take his place. I felt my stomach drop. I'm not interested in Frank's dealings. I've made it clear that I won't continue his legacy. Perhaps you don't understand the gravity of the situation, Charles continued, his voice growing colder. This isn't a choice. The people who were loyal to Frank, the ones who helped build this empire, they expect you to uphold it. And if you don't, they'll take what's rightfully theirs. You've inherited more than just assets, Ms. Benson. You've inherited a responsibility. A responsibility you can't simply walk away from. I clenched my jaw, my anger rising. I'm done being manipulated. If they want to fight, they'll have to go through me. Don't make any decisions you'll regret, he warned. You'll see soon enough that there's more at stake here than just your family. You're part of something much bigger now. The line went dead, and I sat there staring at the phone, a knot forming in my chest. What had I gotten myself into? Frank's world was vast, far beyond the beach house or the businesses. And now it seemed like there was no way out. The following morning I called Rachel and Evan into the living room. I had to tell them what was happening. They deserved to know. We're not just dealing with Frank's estate, I began, trying to steady my voice. This is bigger than I thought. Frank's empire isn't just property. It's a network of deals, alliances, and people who have their own stakes in this. And now they want me to take his place. Rachel frowned, her brow furrowing. You're not going to let them push you around, right? We fought for this, Mom. For our future. We can't just let them take it from us. Evan, who had been silent until now, spoke up. What if they try to force you into something you can't control? What if you're already too deep? I sighed, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. I don't know what to do, Evan. Frank's world was built on power, and I'm stuck in the middle of it. If I walk away now, everything we've fought for could be lost. But if I stay, I'm not sure what I'm walking into. Rachel stood up and walked over to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. Mom, whatever happens, we're in this together. We'll fight with you, not against you. But you can't do it alone. Evan nodded, his expression serious. We've come this far. We won't back down now. I looked at both of them, my children. They were the reason I kept fighting, the reason I couldn't walk away. But I was starting to realize something. The fight wasn't just for the house or the inheritance. It was for the future we had dreamed of. A future where we could be free from the past, from the shadows Frank had cast over us. And it was up to me to decide how far I was willing to go to protect that future. Later that week, I met with Charles Davenport again. This time I went prepared. I wasn't going to let him, or anyone, make me feel like a puppet in Frank's game. I walked into the meeting room, my back straight, my resolve hardening with every step. Ms. Benson, Charles greeted me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I trust you've given our conversation some thought. I've made my decision, I said firmly. I'm not interested in continuing Frank's business or his legacy. I'm going to create my own path. Charles didn't flinch. That's a noble sentiment, Ms. Benson. But it's not that simple. You see, Frank didn't just leave you a beach house. He left you the power to influence people, decisions, entire industries. And you're going to have to decide what to do with that power. I don't want it, I replied, my voice steady. I'm not Frank. And I won't become him. Charles leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. You think you can just walk away from all this? That you can abandon everything Frank built without consequence? You're already in too deep. The only question now is whether you'll control the empire, or whether the empire will control you. I stood up, my heart racing, but my mind clearer than ever. I'll never let it control me. If I have to tear it down piece by piece, I will. But I'm done being controlled. I'm done letting Frank's empire dictate who I am. Charles watched me, his expression unreadable. For a moment, there was silence between us, a silent acknowledgement that the battle was far from over. But I'll fight, I said, looking him dead in the eye. And I'll win. As I left the meeting, I knew the road ahead would be filled with challenges. Frank's empire wasn't going to fall without a fight, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had my family, my strength, and my will to create a new future. I wasn't just inheriting his legacy, I was reshaping it. And no one, not even the powerful figures Frank had aligned himself with, was going to take that from me. The days following my meeting with Charles Davenport were filled with an unsettling quiet. For the first time since I inherited Frank's empire, I realized just how much I had underestimated the gravity of the situation. The power Frank had left behind was more than just a business empire. It was a carefully constructed network of people, money, and influence. And I had only just begun to scratch the surface. The phone calls began. First, it was the whispers. Quiet, veiled threats disguised as business inquiries. Then it became louder. People from Frank's past, his loyalists, began demanding my attention. They came in the form of business partners, wealthy investors, and even politicians whose names I had only heard in passing. They were all waiting for me to make a move. They wanted to know where I stood, what I intended to do with the power that had been thrust upon me. I had thought the decision to walk away from Frank's legacy would be simple, but it wasn't. Not when the web was this intricate, this tangled. Every move I made seemed to trigger a ripple effect. Every person I chose to meet with or refused to meet with sent a message. And every message could have consequences far beyond what I could foresee. One evening, Rachel and Evan came to me, their faces serious, almost tense. "Mom," Rachel began, her voice unusually quiet, "we've been hearing things. People are talking. They're starting to wonder what you're going to do with Frank's empire. And there are rumors that the other heirs are pushing for control." Evan looked at me, his brow furrowed. "We can't let them take it from us, Mom. We've fought too hard to just walk away. But I think it's time we do something to solidify our place in this." I could see the determination in both of their eyes. They weren't backing down. Neither was I. "We're not backing down," I said, my voice firm. "But we need to think carefully. This isn't just about holding on to property. It's about taking control, making decisions that will change the course of our future." Rachel nodded, though her expression remained cautious. "So what's the plan?" I took a deep breath. The weight of the decision was pressing down on me, but I knew it was time to act. I couldn't afford to keep waiting, to keep dodging the inevitable. "The plan is simple," I said, my voice steady. "We take control of the assets Frank left behind. We move quickly, but we do it with intention. We don't just fight for the property, we fight for our family's future. We rebuild everything Frank broke. But this time it's on our terms." Evan looked reassured, but I could tell Rachel wasn't entirely convinced. "But what about the people who've been loyal to Frank? What do we do about them?" "We cut them off," I said decisively. "We don't just keep the power, we redefine it. We don't need Frank's allies or anyone who's been part of his empire. We're building something new, and we're doing it without the influence of anyone who's been tied to his corrupt world." There was a long pause before Rachel spoke again, her voice quieter. "But what if it's too late? What if they've already taken too much?" I don't know what's too late, Rachel, I replied, my tone hardening. But I do know that we can't let fear dictate our choices. I won't let Frank's legacy control us. Not anymore. The next few days were a whirlwind. I reached out to the most trusted people I knew, people who had no ties to Frank's empire, to help me begin the process of cutting ties with the old world. We started by liquidating some of the businesses Frank had controlled, selling off assets that no longer fit into our new vision. It was a difficult choice, but it was necessary. But with every move I made, the pressure mounted. The phone calls became more frequent, more insistent. People from Frank's world weren't giving up without a fight. And the more I pushed back, the more they pushed forward. It wasn't until one night, as I sat in my office, going through papers and making plans for the future, that I realized how deep Frank's network went. I had thought that by cutting the major ties, we could finally break free, but the truth was far more complicated. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. I looked up, startled, but before I could say anything, the door opened. Charles Davenport walked in, his expression grim. He didn't wait for me to invite him in. He just stepped forward, his presence filling the room. "Ms. Benson," he said, his voice cold. "We need to talk." "What do you want, Charles?" I asked, already sensing the impending confrontation. "I've given you space to decide what you want to do with Frank's legacy," he said, his tone measured. "But you're making a mistake. You think you can tear it all down and rebuild it without consequences. But there are people who won't let you. People who won't let you walk away from this unscathed." I stood up, my eyes locking with his. "I've already made my choice, Charles. I'm not backing down. You can take your threats elsewhere." Charles didn't flinch. "It's not a threat, Margaret. It's a warning. If you think Frank's empire is just about the beach house or a few businesses, you're wrong. There are connections, networks, and people who will stop at nothing to protect what Frank built. And if you keep pushing, you might just lose everything. Including your family." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. The reality of what I was up against was clearer than ever. Frank had built something far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. And now, it was time to decide if I was willing to lose everything to take control. The decision weighed heavily on me as the days dragged on. I had already lost so much. My trust in my children, my connection to the legacy I had inherited, my understanding of what power meant. But I couldn't turn back now. The days leading up to the final showdown were the longest of my life. Each hour felt like it stretched into eternity as I fought to balance the weight of the empire Frank had left behind with the future I was trying to build. Every time I thought I had a handle on things, another challenge, another obstacle arose. Charles Davenport's warning still echoed in my mind. He was right about one thing. Frank's empire wasn't just about money or property. It was a tangled mess of connections, favors, and deals that stretched far beyond what I had imagined. And I was smack in the middle of it. The more I tried to tear it down, the more it seemed to fight back. But I wasn't backing down. I had made my choice, and I wasn't going to let fear control me anymore. The phone rang one morning, another call I didn't want to answer but knew I had to. It was Thomas, my lawyer. His voice, usually calm, was laced with urgency. "Margaret, we need to talk. The situation with Frank's other heirs has escalated. They're planning to take this to court, and they're not going to back down." My heart sank. "What are they planning to do?" "They've filed a motion to contest your ownership of the property. They claim that you're unfit to manage it, that you're dismantling the legacy Frank left behind." I rubbed my forehead, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. "I'm not dismantling anything. I'm rebuilding it. This isn't about keeping Frank's empire alive. It's about creating something new. A future for my family." "I know, but the court might not see it that way," Thomas warned. "You need to be prepared for a long, difficult battle." I hung up, my mind spinning. How had it come to this? What was I really fighting for? Was it the beach house? The power? Or was it the family I had almost lost in the chaos of Frank's world? The answer was clear. Later that afternoon, I called Rachel and Evan into the living room. I had to let them in on everything, The stakes were too high to keep them in the dark. "Mom, what's going on?" Rachel asked, concern written across her face. "We've been hearing more rumors. What are we really up against?" I looked at both of them, my children who had stuck by me through everything. They deserved the truth. "I've been holding on to Frank's empire," I began, my voice steady but tired, "because I thought it was the only way to protect us. But I've realized something. I've been fighting for something that doesn't matter. What matters is what we build next. The future. Our future." Evan frowned, his jaw tightening. "But what about the inheritance? What about the businesses, the beach house? We can't just let all that go." "We're not letting it go," I said firmly. "We're choosing to step away from it all. I've realized that keeping Frank's empire alive is not what I want. I want to rebuild. I want to create something that's ours. No strings attached." Rachel's eyes softened. "I get it now, Mom. You've been trying to protect us all this time, but you don't need to carry all of this weight. We'll build our own future together." Evan nodded, his expression more thoughtful than before. "We're with you no matter what. This isn't just about what we inherited. It's about what we're going to do with it." And so the decision was made. We would fight together, but not for Frank's empire. We would fight to reclaim our lives, to move forward and create something new. Something built on trust, love, and the strength of our family. It was no longer about money or power. It was about us. The legal battle was far from over, but I had finally found peace with the decision I had made. No matter the outcome, I knew we would be okay. We had each other, and that was all we needed. As I looked around the room at Rachel and Evan, I realized that I had already won. Not because of the beach house or the wealth or the influence, but because we had found our way back to each other. And together we were unstoppable. Thank you for following us on this journey. If you've found strength in our story, if you've been inspired by the choices we've made, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. The fight is over, but our story is just beginning. Stay with us, there's always more to come.